5 minutes past 4 o'clock. We'll get started, and I'm sure the other participants will keep on dialing in. So, without any further delay, let's begin the webinar. First of all, I welcome the entire audience to our webinar. Thank you so much for registering and taking time out to attend the webinar. With every webinar, SIIC team try to bring more key insights and present a different perspective on the table so that you always have a couple of take home message uh, from the webinar that we are scheduling. For today's webinar, we've got two stalwarts. One is Dr. Rakesh Kalpala and the other one is Mr. R. Madhavan. Both of them
சார் ஃபோன் பண்ணியிருந்தீங்க காவனி பக்கத்துல இருந்து.
both of them are experts in their own field. Our first talk would be by Dr. Rakesh Kalpala. And uh, to introduce him, Dr. Rakesh Kalpala is a senior consultant gastroenterologist at AIG Hospital. He also serves as the director endoscopy Center for Obesity and Metabolic Therapy at AIG Hospital. I welcome you, Dr. Kalpala, and thank you so much for taking time out from your precious schedule. I know you guys are working at the forefront, and still you had time to make yourself available for the webinar. We are really looking forward to hear from you what are the current challenges and the problems you're facing in your field. And let's hope to develop some innovative solutions around those problem statements. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Aditi. I'm audible, I believe. So I'll share my screen. Okay, so at the outset, I thank you and Dr. Nikhil Agarwal, and of course, SIC and IIT Kanpur hang me here. So when I got the mail from you and Nikhil, I was kind of zapped because it's very easy to address the same fraternity rather than addressing another fraternity because
Right.
we have to. I hope I meet your expectations. I will be very superficial from the scientific point of view. But again, the reason why I thought that I'll step in and then try to kind of give some ideas for this upcoming budding IITians on not exactly on the entrepreneurship because I'm not really a big entrepreneur, but at least some innovative ideas and thoughts which I can provocate in their minds so that they'll work on these kind of gadgets or whatever we have in the field.
Sure, sir.
Coming to the gastroenterological invents, I mean, in the gastroenterology, I think probably if you see in total the medical science, cardiology, pulmonology, and all. So I think gastroenterology is the one which is taking a big leap in the past 1 to 2 decades, and it's going to be the front runner for all the innovations and opportunities in the field of medicine. Of course, I don't deny there's a lot in the genetic field and in the molecular biology and basic sciences, but in the advanced sciences, gastroenterology is going to play a big role in our daily life, and also it's got a bright future, especially for the technocrats to do a lot of experiments and then do some discoveries and inventions in this field. So if you see the recent advances in gastroenterology, I don't want to really touch upon the basic sciences like functional bowel disease, inflammatory bowel disease, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But I think for you people, gastrointestinal microbiome, there's gut microbiome and GI endoscopy. These are the two fields where you have a immense potential to do research and then to innovate new ideas. So my outliners will be primarily as a part of the physics. I want to touch upon the radio frequency ablation, electroporation, then artificial intelligence, which you're all experts more than me, but I still believe I just wanted to make a sync between you and us, how we can work together. And of course, obesity and diabetes, which is perpetually the problem. It is like as good as pandemic like COVID in the current scenario. So if you see the radio frequency ablation, you all know better than me about the properties of it. So what we look upon is the destruction of the unwanted tissues by generating a kind of heat. So it is widely used, as we all know, in cardiac arrhythmias, cancers, varicose veins, and uterine bleeding, and so on and so forth. But especially in endoscopy, we have these radio frequency catheters being used with the electrical generator connected to a bipolar electrode to destruct the tissues, especially in conditions like cancers and other uh, dreadful GI problems. So sorry for the busy slide, but what I thought is you as from the science, science background. So what we have to understand is RFA is basically an energy delivered at 450 to 500 kilohertz with alternative positive and negative poles along the electrode rays. So what this does is once you deliver the RFA, there will be protein coagulation and destruction of the vessels, leading to death of the particular tissue. So mostly it is done as RFA is used in the malignant conditions. And of course, there are a few benign conditions also where we use. And you have a direct contact of this particular catheter onto the targeted tissue. And all the RFAs available currently, at least in GI background, GI field, are all having a dedicated generator which releases a set of frequency, preset frequency RFA ablations. And we usually, when we target, when do it, it goes up to the fourth level of the muscle layer, that is a muscularis mucosa. So that is around 700 to 800 microns depth, this go. And as you see on this, these are how the electrodes are placed in RFA catheter, positive, negative, positive, negative. And if you see the figure B, this is one catheter which is used as a RFA, especially when you have these esophageal cancers or Barrett's esophagus, what we call in medical term, that is a pre-malignant condition of esophageal cancer. And on the figure C is a catheter which goes through the endoscope. So in fact, there are two catheters which are being currently used in GI endoscopy. One is from the Korean company called StarMed, and another is from Habib catheter, which is from a UK-based company. And these two are currently in work. So why I got this topic into is this is one area where you can look upon doing something indigenously, a radio frequency ablation. Because radio frequency ablation is used in many areas in the field of medical science. And we as gastroenterologists primarily use this in esophageal cancers. Then the second condition is, it's like, you heard of this condition called cirrhosis of liver. So there, these people will have prominent vascular endings which often bleed, and that are called GAVE. So we usually ablate it with argon plasma coagulation, but off late we are using RFA also to make the tissue kind of go into apoptosis or death so that the blood supply will diminish. Radiation proctitis, again, people will be taking radiation for some cancers and they develop kind of ulcerations in the rectum, which leads to immense bleed from the anal region. So that is called radiation proctitis, where again RFA has an established role. And of course, as I said, in malignancies, liver malignancies, biliary malignancies, pancreatic malignancies, there is an established role of RFA beyond doubts. So just to conclude here on this topic, what I want to emphasize to the crowd here is the technocrats is something where we can develop these radio frequency ablation catheters, which are of course all imported. So this is one area where you can look upon and then try to work on this and develop some indigenous technologies in this field. Second, this again is a topic of itself, but just briefly touch upon what we have in artificial intelligence in endoscopy. So as you all are better learned people than me on this AI and ML, machine learning field. So diagnostically, we do the computer-aided detection and computer-aided diagnostics in this. And of course, therapeutically also, we are trying to get into this AI-based technology of treating certain ailments. But predominantly at this level, we have diagnostic artificial intelligence being established. And as you see here on the screen, there is a polyp. Polyp is a kind of a mucosal protuberance inside the intestine. So once you see the polyp on the screen, when you're doing an endoscopy or colonoscopy, then you don't know whether it is malignant or it is a benign or it is what nature it is. So what you do is you took a biopsy and then send it to the pathologist for histopathology. Now we have something called an optical biopsy where you don't require a pathologist. And as an endoscopist or gastroenterologist, you put in the scope, switch on some 1-2 buttons, then you get the diagnosis out of it. So on this basis, there is a lot of data being captured, and then we have developed an algorithm in terms of artificial intelligence. And this artificial intelligence is being extrapolated to multiple fields in the GI field, like early gastric cancer detection, Barrett's esophagus, that is pre-malignant esophageal carcinoma, in endoscopic or robotic surgeries, pancreatic cancer detection, polyp detection, as I showed you in the last slide, and even in the inflammatory bowel disease, that is diseases of the intestine where you get the ulcers. So all these conditions, artificial intelligence has got its role, and it is getting evolved day by day. And as you see on this short video, this is one which is there in the market. It's called endobrain or endocytoscopy. What you do is you identify the polyp, put your scope there, and then just click the button. As you see here, it will tell where it's in, whether it is neoplastic or benign lesion. So see the advantage of having this artificial intelligence in the field of endoscopy. So you don't need histopathologist. You don't have to wait for 3-4 days, and you don't need a real expertise or scratch your brains on or on what exactly the etiology is. You just put a scope on that polyp, switch the button, and then you can get whether it is neoplastic, that is cancerous or non-cancerous. So that is how the science is getting evolved day by day, and especially with this artificial intelligence, machine learning. I am sure it's going to be, it's already established in the field of pathology and radiology, and I'm very much sure that in the field of endoscopy, it is going to take a big leap in the next decade and make our job easy and your job easy, and also instantaneous, fast results will come in this. So that is about AI in endoscopy. The third topic, what I wanted to touch upon, and then which I am really working on, and probably which is the need of the hour, is this triad of diabetes, obesity, and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. As pandemic COVID is going on, so I usually label it as BC and AC, that is before Christ, after Christ. So it is before COVID and after COVID. After COVID, what we see in the last 9 to 12 months is people have become very prosperous, not in terms of economics, but in terms of the physical body profile. They are getting fatter and fatter, and as they are sitting and working from home. In fact, my position where I'm sitting on the chair, some people, I presume they are sitting like this in the same position for at least 18 hours a day, especially in the IT industry. So diabetes, obesity, and fatty liver. So these all go hand in hand. And there is a lot of immense potential in this area to work upon, not only to create some inventions and discoveries, but also to give back to the society by addressing the mankind about their well-being. Because if you address these conditions, I'm sure you're going to have a hold on and control on many of the diseases from head to toe. So in that way, as you see, diabetes is a global emergency. And I think around, if you stand around and see 10 people around, I think 5 will be diabetic. That is what is India. India is a diabetic capital of the world. So if you see the Southeast Asian census, 78 million by 2015 and 140 by 2040. Isn't it alarming? So we need to do something in this field. I personally feel if you want to contribute back something to society, do something innovative in this and then give it back to society. So if you see the treatment aspects in diabetes since 2000, there are 29 different types of treatments which came in the field of diabetes. It can be pharmacotherapy, it can be any intervention, so on and so forth. But still, HbA1c, see, don't get confused, because HbA1c is basically a glycosylated hemoglobin that tells you about the control of your diabetes in the body. And what we usually look upon is to achieve HbA1c of less than 7. But unfortunately, in the last decade, with this Journal of American Diabetes Association, hardly 40% of them are going to the desired level of less than 7%. That means that more than 7% HbA1c in diabetics is there in more than half of the diabetic population. So to understand about this diabetes, obesity, and fatty liver, so I just want you to have enlightenment on the little bit on this metabolism. I don't bore you with the real science, but as we all know, and most of you know, that what we know is pancreas is the organ which secretes insulin, and that is the main key role player for the glucose metabolism. But now the theory has changed, the science has changed, thoughts have changed. What we understand now is the metabolic control, the epicenter of metabolic control in the human body is not pancreas, not brain, it is the duodenum. That is, duodenum means small intestine is divided into 3 parts, duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. So duodenum means the first part of small intestine. That is again divided into duodenum, D1, D2, D3, D4, but primarily it is one part of the small intestine which starts, and after the stomach ends, the duodenum starts. As you see here, the C loop, what we call. So duodenum is the epicenter of metabolic control because here you have a lot of cells within the duodenal muscle layers which secrete multiple hormones, and these hormones control the metabolism of the body. So as you see here, each, if you see the anatomy and histology of duodenum just superficially, so the normal wall thickness is 3 mm, and there are some hormones which are secreted here called as cholecystokinin, peptide YY, and GLP-1 analogs. So all these play a major role in controlling the metabolism related to diabetes and obesity. So what happens here is, as you see in this pictorial diagram or the animation, the next 1-2 slides, you see there are white dots and there are black dots on the wall of the duodenum. So these are called incretins and anti-incretins. You see this ball of food, the bolus of food is coming down and then getting into the stomach, churning, and then getting a duodenum. So this food is actually a nutritious food. You see there are a lot of vegetables, balanced diet, what we call. So once you eat, this food bolus comes and lodges into the stomach, then comes into the duodenum, and that's where the digestion process starts in the stomach and duodenum. So what happens when you have these incretins and anti-incretins equally balanced or posed, you have the glycemic control normal. The euglycemia means sugar control, sugar is normal. I mean, the blood sugars are normal. And if you eat a chocolate or a dessert, which we all love to, and once you eat this fatty meal, what happens is, as you see on the pictorial diagram, the anti-incretins increase in number. Vis-a-vis, the incretins also increase. But if only the anti-incretins increase, that leads to increased blood sugar, increased triglycerides, increased fat, cholesterol, leading to deposition of fat in the liver, pancreas, everywhere. So our concept now is, if there is something which will protect or stop these anti-incretins to secrete more once you have a fatty meal, then probably those anti-incretins, if they are controlled, that leads to decrease in your production of these, the cholesterol, fat, and other stuff. So for that, you need something to be done at the duodenum level. So where the anti-incretin secretion will decrease, incretins will be proportionately normal, and the balance will happen. So as you see in this weight, in this weighing thing, you have the anti-incretins which are increased in number and incretins are decreased. That leads to the imbalance of the things in the duodenum, leading to hyperglycemia or increased blood sugars. This is a same thing has been depicted in electron microscopy in the humans and rats model, where you see increased GLP-1 and GIP-1 hormones, leading to more deposition of these in the duodenal mucosa, especially in diabetic people. So as I told you, can we do something where the incretin anti-incretin balance will be achieved by putting in something artificially at this duodenal mucosa level? So these thoughts have been got into scientists and doctors and endocrinologists in 2004. So then what has been proposed is, why can't we create a duodenal sleeve, that is a sheet which covers this mucosa? So what has been done that time is, there is a sheet being artificially created at the duodenal level, where on one arm they have completely blocked the duodenal mucosa to touch the food particles. On the other arm, they have partially exposed the duodenal mucosa, and then they did some studies. So what happened is, as the incretins and anti-incretins are the main key factors, when there is a balance between both, then there will be glucose homeostasis. When the anti-incretins dominate the incretins, then the insulin resistance happens and blood sugars increase. So you need to have enough of the anti-incretins and incretins in a proportionate manner, which I'm just trying to put it in another diagrammatic form. So to address this, earlier, kind of a decade before or 2 decades before, they started doing these bariatric surgeries, where they kind of reloop the intestines so that the balance will be achieved. But again, surgery is surgery. So then we as gastroenterologists and endocrinologists thought, let's do something endoscopically, which is minimally invasive, which is called as metabolic endoscopy. So then there is a group of people from US who have developed this endo barrier, as you see here. And as I told you, there is a liner which lines the duodenum and then prevents the food to get absorbed in the duodenum, thereby balancing the incretins and anti-incretins. But unfortunately, with this endo barrier has been commercialized, FDA approved, but there were some side effects. And unfortunately, FDA was forced to withdraw this from the market. So taking this concept, we at AAG started doing a kind of a startup called as EndoSleep. We started working with a group from Metamodics. It's a company from Minneapolis, which is the hub of medical devices. And what we did was we developed a indigenous duodenal sleeve, which contains a stent. Stent is like a metal material which will anchor at the stomach and duodenal junction, so that there will be a sheath which covers the duodenum and then that prevents the absorption of nutrients. If time, Aditi, you can stop me if I cross 30 minutes, but let me know. So what I just show you in the video, how we have designed this device and then how it works. As you see, this is an animation where scope is being put, and this is the device which we have designed, which will get deployed at the level of stomach and duodenum, and then the sheath will be opened up at the duodenal level, and this sheath covers the duodenal mucosa. So whatever food you eat, it goes through the stomach into the duodenal mucosa, and then it will prevent the absorption of the food directly into the duodenum, because there will be a sheath which prevents the food getting attached to duodenal mucosa. So this is a very pretty simple device, which is hardly takes 10 to 15 minutes to deploy endoscopically. Any average endoscopist across the world can do this. There's no rocket science in this. Vis-a-vis, it's very easy to retrieve also. We put this device for 6 months inside the intestine of the human body, and then after 6 months we will extract it out, because of course it's a foreign body. And even the extraction is very simple. You just have to, we designed another way of extracting it by just pulling that lasso, collapsing the stent and getting the whole stent in the capsule, and then pulling out the device. Again, this takes hardly 5 minutes. So this is how it is collapsed, and then we can just withdraw it and take it out. So this device we developed indigenously with the help of the startup from US. And what we found in the first in humans trials done in the world is we had a significant improvement of weight loss, as well as improvement in the glycemic control by around 0.5 to 1.8%. But again, there was a little bit of migration issue in this. The reason why we started this device and working on and still working on is we want to develop something which is indigenously made and also very affordable to the Indian in the Indian scenario, and again which can be done by any average endoscopist. It doesn't need a real experience. So with this motto, we designed this, and then you almost have achieved 90% of the success in this, and a little bit of migration issues are there, which we are going to answer. Because of this COVID, little delay happened, or else we are confident enough to launch this device and take it to the FDA approval probably by this year end. And the second thing, which again at the duodenal mucosa level, is something called as duodenal mucosal resurfacing. This is again a European marked approval has been there, and they are waiting for FDA approval. This again is one which will ablate the mucosa. Unlike the previous one, which I stored a stent being deployed, this what it will do is it will something like radio frequency ablation. It will generate a heat technology, thereby destructing the cells in the duodenum, which leads to balance of these incretins and anti-incretins. So this is currently being marketed. It's commercially available. Why I wanted to show you this is, after this, a couple of slides, I'll be talking on the electroporation technique, which you all know about that. But the reason why I wanted to spend some time on the electroporation is because we already started working with your esteemed institute, IIT Kanpur and SIIC, and then we are trying to develop an indigenously made electroporation technique for addressing this duodenal mucosa. So this is again about the DMR in brief. I don't want to go into the depth of it. So as I told you, duodenal mucosal resurfacing, proof of concept, procedural development, and initial implementation. This is done by a group from the Western world based on the heat technology. So with this in mind, we at AAG Hospital started working with IIT Kanpur on the electroporation technique. I'll tell you why we chose electroporation. Electroporation is a non-heat technology, and compared to the earlier one which I showed, this is very easy to do, safe, and there are assumptions that in a long run, when you do these heat technologies, that might have some carcinogens being produced there. So we presume that electroporation will not have all those side effects in the long term. So as I don't go into the physics again because I have the masters in front of me. So electrical pulses, which are the nanoscale level, are the ones which are the main basic nanopores, the principle behind electroporation. So these irreversible electroporation is a technique what we are trying to use, which will increase the temperature on the targeted tissues, and then that leads to destruction of the cells there, leading to the balancing of the environment. So we are not very sure at this level whether the temperature change versus the cell membrane poration, which will really affect, but we are working on it. And the advantage of the electroporation is it will give a clear demarcation between the ablated and non-ablated tissues when you do it. And of course, this is being established in other areas like where the electroporation technique is well established in treating liver cancers, pancreatic cancers, and so on and so forth. So with this in mind, we started working on to develop some generator of electroporation indigenously and also electrodes. As you see on the screen, the figure A is the one which is the console which is primarily used, and this is from a company called Angiodynamics, which is currently being used in 2 or 3 centers in India. Then you target the tissues with the software which is inbuilt, then use this monopolar needle electrodes and ablate the mucosa. And of course, you synchronize that with the cardiac rhythm with this generator, which is used as a add-on to the therapy. So what we started doing is we see, because this has to go through the endoscope. So we are trying to design now an electrode which will be having the electroporation technology, which has got a distal shaft, a proximal shaft, and the middle portion, which has got the electroporation generators or electroporation electrodes. So this is what this will do is it will cause passage of the conductive liquid, which leads to electroporation, and you need a medium to do that, right? So for that, you need electrical conductive liquid, which can be saline, hypertonic saline, dextrose, or a 3% normal saline, or potassium carbonate or hydrogen. So this, which medium really works, we are again trying to do the bench side work. And with this sequential ablation, the destruction of the tissue happens. And as I told you, mind you, this is a non-heat technology, which is more safe and then more robust compared to the DMR, what I showed earlier. So with this in the back of the mind, because now we are at the level of designing the electrode, we have to see whether we can make the electrode to get into the duodenum through the scope or over the scope. That's again, we are working on the feasibility studies. Of course, we'll be doing the animal models first and then go into the human models. Extrapolating this electroporation technique, it's not only for the duodenum. What you can see on the screen is you can also, if you can develop these electroporation based catheters, then you can use these for celiac ganglion block. Celiac ganglion block is patient who has immense pain. If you block the ganglion, the whole pain process will get arrested in the body. So that is one thing. Then you have also the nerves which supply to different organs. They can be targeted and you can do electroporation on that so that you can decrease the pain stimuli. You can also decrease the secretions if you have any hypersecretory states. Then the other uses which you can extrapolate is in cancers, then also to control hypertension problems. These are all the things which we can work upon once you have something indigenously made. So electroporation technology, I feel, I'm sure it is there in few areas, but especially in the GI field, if we can develop that, then it has got multiple uses. So then coming to the another topic, which is very interesting, I think most of the people here, especially the biomed folks and bioengineering science folks, you all must be reading day in and day out about the gut microbiome. I'll tell you, trust me, gut microbiome is now the second brain of the body. It is going to be. So it is as important as the brain. So whatever happens now and henceforth, or what happened earlier, gut microbiome is the facilitator as well as a culprit for good and bad in the body. I'll tell you why in the next 3-4 slides. The last decade has been a very interesting rising trend about knowing the gut bacteria. Earlier it used to be like, okay, gut bacteria is there, okay, they are there. We never used to have a real interest on what's happening inside. But now, as you see here, if you see the gut microbiome, it's such a complex thing that it's impossible to study on that, because there are, as we all know, I mean, we might not be aware that bacteria is not I mean, the gut microbacteria, fungi, they're all not enemies or a foreign bodies in our, they are a part and parcel of our body. If you see the different kind of species, the phyla in the bacteria inside the gut, as you see here, the last line, in the stomach, you have 10 to 1000 or 10,000 bacteria per gram, because stomach is an acidic environment, they can't survive. But as you go into the small intestine and colon, you see there are 10 power 11, 10 power 12, there is immense number of bacteria, millions and billions of bacteria in the body. And mind you, they're all friends. They live with us. They are commensals. They are not our enemies. But there is a changing paradigm in the thought process about these commensal organisms. So earlier we used to think that pathogens are all external, they come and invade us, they do harm on us. But now we, from past 10, 15 years, we came to know that the commensal gut bacteria, they are friendly, they are our friends as well as enemies, because they are there in our body as natural commensals, but if they are increased in proportion, that leads to diseases. Among them, one example is Helicobacter pylori. I don't know how many of you know about it, but that is a bacteria which will precipitate increased acidity formation in the body and also leads to ulcers. So if they are increased in high proportion, you need to eliminate those H. pylori bacteria, so that will decrease the acid production, and in a long run that might lead to cancers also. So it's very important to eradicate it. Another bacteria is Clostridium difficile, which also is a common commensal, but again increased proportion of that leads to adverse effects in the body. So cause and cure, a revolution in medical thinking happened. And as I told you, the common commensals such as Clostridium difficile can cause disease. At the same time, there are some commensals which can cure the disease. I'm sorry. So based on this, people started working on the gut microbiome and then started understanding about the gut microbiome. There are different ages and geographical population have different microbiome. See, what I have is different from what you have, and what we have is different from people in the Western world. So as you see here on the topmost, factors affecting the microbiome, you have the genetics, which will alter the microbiome, the birth route, the geography. As I told you, our microbiome is different from other Asians, and our Asians microbiome is different from Europeans and Americans. Then you have the hygiene, which is very important. Of late, what we see from past 9 months is sanitizer has become a part of our body. So every 10, 15 minutes, subconsciously, you are using your sanitizer and washing your hands. I'm telling you, in a long run, this is going to be a hazardous, because you need some bacteria to go inside, even if they're bad also. That is what we don't quite often realize. So over hygiene also is injurious to health. Quote unquote, over hygiene is also injurious to health. Stress, again, as we all know, I bet there is no person on this earth who has no stress, can be in different forms. Diet and nutrition, again, that is, it's becoming worse day by day. So you can't even think of it. Drugs, again, for every damn thing you pop in a pill, it can be an antibiotic or an anti-analgesic or anything, whatever it is. So these are all the factors which alter the gut microbiome. Unfortunately, we live with it and we cannot, survive without all these things. So diet in Asians in IBD is basically inflammatory bowel disease or any of the diseases. So you see here the juicy ham and burgers and McDonald's and KFC. And on the right side, you see, which is good to look, but probably not very palatable to eat, the salads. So the answer to the diet puzzle may not relate to the food components, that is hamburger versus vegetables versus rice, but to specific food additives in Western world, which of late, unfortunately, we are adapting as preservatives, that is the fructose in other diets. I'll just show you what are those. So the dietary emulsifiers are the culprits which are altering this gut microbiota. There's a good paper in 2015 in the Nature where you see the mayonnaise with emulsifier and the mayonnaise without emulsifier. Which one you opt? Obviously, you opt the left-hand side, isn't it? If you don't have emulsifier, that's how the mayonnaise looks. So then again, with all these additions, you have the juicy, fantastic, delicious look, which you hop on day in, day out. So artificial sweeteners like stevia, saccharin, and ACEK, these are all the components which have negative effects on the gut microbiota. Unfortunately, we are living with them, and more, 90% of, I bet you go out of this room and then again start eating the same stuff. So that's one thing which we have to change. So the triad of evil is microbiota, antibiotics or analgesics, emulsifiers, and non-sugar sweeteners. You say, no, I don't eat sugar, I take only the pills, the no, sugar-free pills. But I'm telling you, you're taking poison. So to address this, I'll just come on to something which you all must not have anticipated in your dreams, but this is a fact and this is the future, which is there in the next 1-2 slides projected. Many, many years ago, in the Chinese dynasty in 4th century, the Chinese doctors used to administer fecal material through the mouth. Can you imagine? It's a fact. So the reason for that is they used to prepare these fresh or fermented fecal suspensions and make them eat or drink. The person had any food poisoning, like diarrhea, vomiting, constipation, and so on and so forth. So that used to be called as veterinary medicine. Mind you, now we are going towards that fecal microbial transplantation. This is installation of the stool from a healthy person into a sick person to cure a certain disease. It can be autologous, that is the person's own stool, or heterologous, that is another person's stool. So this is the treatment which is probably going to be there in the next decade. And see, it's probably a little odd to listen, but that is a fact. As you see here on this, from head to toe, any damn disease in the body, what we presume, and it's proved beyond doubt in literature that fecal transplantation is going to be the answer for many diseases. As you see on this, the striking facts: brain, if you have multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's; in the heart, for the atherosclerosis, fatty liver, then for the diabetes, then for obesity, then if you have any of these intestinal infections, or for that matter, even other diseases like any changes in the blood. So for all these, there are studies going on, and there are studies which have proved beyond doubt in randomized controlled trials that fecal transplantation is the need of the hour. And there are like stem cell bank and blood bank, they are going to be the fecal transplantation banks in the near future. They're already propped up in US. We have 2 or 3 in India. We in fact have our own bank where we assess the gut microbiome and also do the fecal transplantation. So as you see here, pertaining to the GI diseases, you have many conditions where fecal transplantation is answered. So in this video, this is actually a video which I downloaded from the net. But what I thought is, as you technocrats here, and with this, why I gave you this gut microbiome concept is, we need to study the gut microbiome of each and every individual on this in the present society, create a gut microbiome bank, and then learn or study how the gut microbiome behaves. And with that knowledge bank with us, we can probably treat or cure or prevent many of the diseases. So with this, see, what happens is, usually to collect the gut microbiome material, we put in endoscope, then we go deep in, aspirate, and then we take out that, and we will store it in the microbiome bank in some storage preservatives. But that's not easy for everybody to come to hospital, get the endoscope done, and it's done obviously by only the gastroenterologist. So can we create a pill, a capsule, which we ingest inside, that will go disintegrate itself in the intestinal pH environment, grab the intestinal secretions, again close on itself, and then comes out of the feces. You collect that capsule and then give it to the lab, and the lab will analyze and then make a bank of make a archive your gut microbiome analysis. So is it possible? Yes. There are folks from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
In the GI system,
I'm
we
sorry
have
for
over
the audio,
1,000
but I
different
thought that
bacterial
is
species,
good for you.
which
So
plays
see
an
here,
essential
just
role
listen to the
in
audio
food
for the next 1
metabolism
minute.
and nutrition and drug uptake. There is interest in terms of studying how this microbial community affects different kinds of diseases such as obesity, diabetes, and also metabolic syndromes. There is a limited understanding because of the limited access that we currently have at different locations throughout the GI tract. This is the first time that we've developed a low-cost sampling device that will allow targeted sampling throughout the GI tract. So the capsule is composed of a 3D printed container that holds a super absorbent hydrogel. Upon entering the GI tract, the pH-sensitive polymer on top of the capsule will dissolve. The fluid inside the targeted location will enter the capsule. The hydrogel will swell. It will basically absorb and collect the targeted microbial community. With its swelling, it will push a plunger that will close the capsule until the capsule is extruded from the body. So once the capsule is extruded, because of the 3D printed geometry that we have, it could be easily unscrewed and the sampled material could be extracted from the capsule. So we envision that this technology could further advance our understanding of how this microbial community affects these different diseases. Because of the simplicity of the design and the low cost, it could be easily used in different kinds of clinical settings and also help improve our understanding about how to develop better drugs that could address these issues and how could we design therapeutics that better could alter or be more compliant with the microbial community.
Okay. So the reason why I showed the video is this is one thing which we have to really look upon, and probably that is one innovation which I mean, I'm a doctor, but at least the thing what I've seen there, it's not rocket science, and I think we can do that. So just have a thought on that, and probably if something works out, we are there to do the bedside stuff, and from your side, the bench side, if you can develop this kind of a capsule which is easy to ingest, and then it will grab the gut microbiota through the intestinal fluid secretions, and then you can store it. So this is like, the person comes in, you give the capsule, and mind you, it is a very economical thing, and they are proposing to develop that, and the cost of it probably will be $1. So isn't it very interesting and mind-boggling? So I thought this is one area which we can all work on and then try to, because as I told you in the last couple of slides, gut microbiota is going to be the, like how the data is a golden mine in for the AI and ML, gut microbiota is going to be the mechanist gold for treating all the diseases from head to toe in the near future. So as if you see on the screen, obesity, diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is like which includes all cardiovascular atherosclerosis, then you have the fatty liver, obesity, so on and so forth. So gut microbiota appears to be a major factor in pathogenesis of these disorders, and strong evidence is emerging as importance of dietary additives in altering the gut microbiota. So we need to work on this and then create a gut microbiome bank, like how the stem cells, when it started, is a huge area of interest on this, and then they have created stem cell banks across the world. So same way, in the next 5 to 10 years, I am sure, I have a gut feeling that gut microbiota will be the need of the hour to work upon. So just to summarize before I go to the end of my talk. So in GI diseases or in the field of gastroenterology, there is a huge potential. I didn't purposefully touch upon the endoscopy only because there are multiple things on that. But what I thought is, in a general indigenous environment, what we can do. So one is about the radiofrequency ablation, locally made, indigenously made catheters and generators. Second, of course, in artificial intelligence, we have a lot of things to do. Third, the electroporation generator and electroporation electrodes, which again has got a immense role in many of the conditions in the gastrointestinal diseases. For that matter, even other medical fields like cardiology, nephrology, neurology. So electroporation is one which you guys have to really think of and then get some thought-provoking ideas on that. So as we all know, necessity is the mother of inventions, and we never thought that we'll get a vaccine, that to a mRNA-based vaccine in 3 months. But if there is a compulsion, there is something which is really burning, creating some burn underneath, then you work together. And medical science has proved it again that a vaccine on RNA has been worked on from past few decades. And the reason why we couldn't get a vaccine for HIV and hepatitis C was RNA virus. But now you see RNA virus, we have chased that goal, and then we crossed the path and barriers and we got a vaccine. So necessity, the mother of inventions, and we have the commitment, the zeal and enthusiasm, then we can do a lot on this. So with this, I'll conclude my talk, and I'll be happy to take some questions and have any interactions. Thank you.
So thank you so much. So we have one question from the participant. What is the role of probiotics in gut microbe? Please comment.
Yeah, so that's a good question. A lot of role in the probiotics. Probiotics is again another field which is having a huge amount of interest and a lot of scientific activity going on. Probiotics, the reason why we all talk on probiotics is because we don't take probiotics. See, the natural probiotic, what you have is in your yogurt, the curd. But probiotics are used basically to replace or kind of add on the existing gut microbiome so that there will be a balance between the antimicrobes and the microbes. So probiotics definitely have a role, and they are a part and parcel of our daily use. And giving probiotics in a natural form is more advisable than giving them in an artificial form, which we all take.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much. And the next question, I have put it in your chat box. So could you please read it? And
let me close my presentation. Yeah. Should I start from the top?
Yeah. So I have sent you privately. So there are research groups working on. Yeah.
Yeah, what is the role of probiotics in gut microbiome? Please comment. That I have answered.
Yes, yes, yes.
In the chat box, we have, I'm not able to scroll it up down.
So it's by Sri Roop Banerjee. Second question.
Oh. I have.
Should I read it for you?
Yeah, please. I'm not able to open it somehow.
Okay, no problem.
So,
yeah. There are research groups working on gastrointestinal biomechanics by means of medical image processing and computer simulation.
Yep.
So the question is, if you can shed light on utility of technologies involved in medical image processing and biomechanics of gastric muscle and gastric content in disease detection, its current status in India and prospects in future.
Yeah, very, very good question. So the gastrointestinal biomechanics is currently, I mean, say in India, we have a little bit of knowledge on this, but we are trying to work on it. Basically, because the stomach is a very vital organ and it has got a lot of robust movements. So to understand the motility of stomach, and primarily stomach is the one which has got an acidic environment. So not many organisms really can survive in, and even if they survive, the God or the nature has created stomach in such a way that it is so robust and tough that it can fight against many of the viruses, bacteria and all. So the technologies involved in medical imaging is, of course, we have the CAT scans and MRIs, but of late there are the newer imaging modalities which are trying to focus on this gastric muscle, and there are some devices or gadgets which will act on the vagus nerve and then try to stimulate the stomach. So that's one thing which is there. But again, this is one niche area. If you can ask me about the computer simulations and other things, not much of work has been done. There are some electronic microscope assisted devices which are being done. But in Indian scenario, definitely I can say authentically, not much work is being done. That's one area definitely you can focus upon.
Okay. So let me check if we have another question. So I would request all the participants to ask questions. If we have any other question, please ask. So I think nobody is asking any question. So thank you, Dr. Kalpana.
Yeah, either they are completely clear or they haven't understood it. No, I trust them.
So okay, Rahul has joined. So yeah, please, yeah. Rahul, over to you. Mute. Rahul can't hear you.
We're not able to hear you, Rahul. Somehow, yeah. No, I'm sure the audience must have gotten a hang of it, where to explore, what to explore. Anyway, we have recorded the whole session, Dr. Kalpana. So we would be posting it on our YouTube channel and we would be circulating amongst all the registered participants. I'm sure we will have some queries as a follow-up of this session. So
I couldn't stop sharing the electroporation. I know you know everything about that.
yes.
I thought, let me give some stimulation to the young folks to do something.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Just confirm, Ati, am I audible now?
Very low, Rahul.
Let me remove the earphones. Sir.
Maybe you take out. Yeah, much better.
Yeah, I think so. Must have been the earphones.
Yes.
Okay. So I see Madhavan sir has already joined. So without taking further time, I'll introduce Madhavan sir. So Madhavan sir is alumnus of IIT Madras from 1986 batch, and he did his BTech in mechanical engineering, and then he joined ONGC before becoming the farmer. He was with ONGC for 7 years, and then he became the farmer in 1993. And since then, he has been working on various aspects of agriculture with respect to mechanizations, soil optimization, and various other aspects. And apart from working as the progressive farmer, he has been also working with various corporates engaged in the agriculture farming. Particularly, he recently joined hands with Escorts groups to work with to build up a model farm, if I'm not wrong, in Bangalore, sir.
Yes, please. Yes.
So yeah, and then that's how we got in touch with Madhavan sir, and we thought, having the next talk on agriculture, it would be great to have him. So I welcome you on behalf of the entire SIC team, sir, and let's hear it from you.
Thank you, Ragul, and the rest of the good participant. I'm happy to share this. Just now I heard, although as though I was almost through an intestine, gone through and then came out of it. Wonderful presentation by Dr. Rakesh. It was excellent. I mean, I didn't understand much, but still there's something more to read. Thanks so much. Let me start immediately. I think Rakul has already informed, so I'll just jump into it. Can we make agriculture as, how do I share the screen? I mean, is the screen?
Sir, share a screen would be on the bottom. There would be a green color button on the bottom, which will say share a screen.
On the bottom.
You'll just need to share, after share a screen, you'll just need to select the window which you want to share, and then it will be live.
Okay, it will be like this, and then share. Is this?
Yes, sir, it is appearing. We'll start the screen sharing. Yes, sir, it is visible now, sir.
Okay. So this is our vision. Can we do this? Agriculture to an industry from lowly occupation, because it is considered a very lowly occupation. And everybody, if you talk of agriculture, they think it's it's somebody's job, not ours. But rest wants to eat. Now this is I just going to run through it because I would like to, the last 5 slides, I would like to stress on it more. These are just the data. So that these I consider it as an opportunity for the entrepreneurs to jump in. We are all economic animals. So if there is a money in it, then it is wonderful to get in there. Now, these are the opportunities or challenges. Convert it into opportunity. The slide is in Tamil. Anyhow, doesn't matter. What they are trying to tell is, the human capital index, we have come down. India is on the, see, look at that. Though we are youth populated, our cognizant effort has come down thanks to our lack of food. That means, our human resource, we have brought it down on the youth population. 20 years ago, when I was addressing it, I was mentioning it. 1 out of 2 is going to be idiots. Simple reason, lack of nutritional food to the brain at a proper window, that we have missed it. And still I don't think we have moved out of that again. 42% India is underweight, and all this contributes to our human index, or we call it human resource development. This is latest, and still we have not moved away from it. Out of 117, we are 102. Some other countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh are all ahead of us. Still, we are hanging around. Look at the productivity levels we talk about on this, and the population growth. Now, what is, look at again, where are we in terms of land and distribution, arable land, which many of us know about it. Croplands on earth, we are the dominant. Look at the climate constraints, we are in a better position. Now, we are having 52% of cultivable land, still we are starved for food. Now, let me talk about from this. The main reason for this is low crop productivity. We are one of the lowest in the world of any crop if you take it into account. So, unless otherwise we improve the productivity, see, now in a rock bottom, it's much easier, even if you do any little thing, you can jump up. Because we can't go down, there is no more room to go down. When I was trying to do this, I had 20 addendums, 20 impediments, which was restricting this crop yield. So I'm selecting out of which, 5 or 6 to start with, and that gave me jump of 200 to 250%. Imagine the rest if you add it to it. Land preparation. We think land preparation is only just plowing with a tractor and tiller and land preparation is done. No. And complete soil analysis. We are doing soil analysis, but we are not doing it completely crop specific, site specific. It is a random checked and given a Xerox copy of the entire district or entire firqa. That is how soil test is done across. 1 or 2 pockets might be doing it individually, but otherwise. Starter fertilizer. So again, a good term. I think we can get into there on the question and answer hour. Placement of fertilizer, irrigation and management. Let's take it into a land preparation. Now, most of the dicotyledon crop can go deep enough if you provide the room in the soil. But what we are trying to do is we are arresting it at 9 inches to 11 inches of our plow layer. Rest is all compacted, and hence the proliferation of root is restricted. Please consider plant root or the mouth of the crop for its performance. And we are ignoring this. That's the reason I took this as a land preparation. It means how much of mechanical tools going to play in this, which I call it sizzle. This is the sizzle tool. Long ago we developed, but then this takes little more horsepower, and we need to redesign this and come out with a cost efficiency in terms of also fuel efficiency. But this has helped, and this has given an improvement of 150% on your yield point. Soil probe. See, we normally, the traditional method of cutting V shape and scratching the profile and then sending it. These are simple tools available. Why not we promote it or make indigenous tools available to a farmer? I consider this as a stethoscope to a farmer who can check his soil, moisture, as well, whereas the root proliferation is taking place. so that the fertilizer could be placed exactly in the mouth so that the plant can perform in optimum level. And this is what we are doing for the fertilizer application. I put a cartoon, that is for the farmers to think about it. And that's how it is fed to the crop. We just apply it on the surface and irrigate, but the roots are buried underneath. Not all the nutrients can pass through it because of the soil chemical characteristics, cation exchange capacity. So some are, tied up in the top itself, like phosphorus, potash. They are not mobile. They are immobile elements. Like nitrogen and boron or mobile elements, they can go through the water and the plants can, get into it. How do we place the major nutrient into the root zone plays a very vital role, and tool is very important for it. This is the tool, simple contraption which I developed it for the same. It can, it can fix below the soil zone whatever you want based on your crop analysis and your soil analysis. Then that is placed exactly on the root zone, and the crop performance was almost 200% jump in their performance. We have tried that even in Bangalore, and it really, we could see the difference. That means we still have a room to fine-tune this tool. Irrigation. This is how we irrigate to the crop across. Flooding. Now that's almost like, inundating the field. That brings down our productivity. We have to develop a tool on how to, irrigate it so that the plant can consume. Plant doesn't need inundation. It needs moisture and air for its assimilation of nutrients, because plant can absorb nutrients in the form of ionic form, dissolved form. That means the water plays such a vital role for its optimum performance. This is how my simple tool was for doing it. The left side was my cabbage field. You could see a small contraption of a pipe. The main line is running through. We can develop this into a much better version. I just wanted to see whether controlling on the irrigation at a particular window, can it contribute to the production level? Yes, it has jumped up, and the crop performance as well, pest and disease reduced. This is interesting for the entrepreneurs to jump in. We can discuss on this. Please look at it in the manpower segment. On our production cost, 52% that we are spending on it. How do we bring it? How do we enhance manpower? Through tools. And that would immediately jump the economy of the farming community. With the basic previous tools which I was mentioning, the technology which we were adapting it in our farms, we were able to achieve this net income, continuously, and it is on the increasing trend. So one can easily do this by improvising the tool front. Now look at this, illiteracy. When I say illiteracy, it is not passes and classes. It is to know how to use these box of tools in an appropriate manner. Farmer suicides, they jump from one to another without knowing, or they don't have proper tools. What they have is, the bottom man, that is the maximum tool they hold on to. The rest of the tools are not there, or they may not be able to use those proper tools, which we are trying to bring it in the innovation area. This, everybody talks about it, right? Monsoon, declining size. Even this year, Tamil Nadu has received so much. We don't know what to do with the rains, how to manage water, how to manage the sources. And most of our land is under, rain fed. How do we convert that into a proper productive area? So these are the challenges we have, and I'm sure we have tools and technologies to go through that. Am I not able to move? Yeah. What should be the objectives is the reduced cost of food more per acre. I only keep, I'm making it very short, allowing the question hours to jump. Unless otherwise we improve the productivity per acre. And that is the only key. Rest is not going to help us at this point of time because we are on the very lowest productivity compared to anyone across. Though we have, in my previous slides, I have mentioned, we have all agronomical natural endowments best on us compared to the other nations which are producing 3 to 4 times on the productivity per acre. I'm not talking of production, productivity, which we are very low. Thank you. And I would like to, get questions or any discussions in there to get into it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Madhavan. So we'll take up the questions now. Let me see. So first question we have is, what is alternative of pesticides?
Alternative to pesticide is feed the crop well to have the resistance to fight back, like all of us. You cannot eradicate pest. You cannot eradicate disease. I'm sure doctor will also agree on that because a medical profession, it is part and parcel of humanity. But the nutrient play a very vital role in resisting ours. Similarly, plant also. Like, for cabbage, when I started grow cabbage in 82, 83, I used to spray around 20 times. Now I spray 3 times.
Okay.
So the
next,
nutrient has, increased the resistance of the plant to fight back. Of course, you'll have 10 or 15%, which you have to control it. Sanitation plays a vital role. We are not putting the sanitation in farming area. You see, sanitation includes clean fields, minimum irrigation, right? And proper nutrient balanced to the crop. So all this contribute to reduce of your pesticide. Like we take antibiotic, but we don't want to take antibiotic, right? So how do you avoid antibiotics? What is the doctor recommend you? Take this, be careful, take good water, all these parameters. Similarly, plant needs it. Sure, we can bring down the pest infestation, thereby reducing the pesticides also.
Okay, next one is so I would love to know about the hidden hunger, micronutrients deficiency. Somebody asked.
Yeah. See, anything, I go back into soil again. You see, land preparation, that's where I put in my agenda in my presentation number 1. See, plant has to absorb nutrient from the soil. So if it is not available in the soil, or if it is depleted, or if it is imbalanced or in an unavailable form, then how do you expect it on the producers? You see, so it has to be available. That's the reason I said complete soil analysis, balancing it for crop specific. Now, do we develop a tool for it in that way? Not just putting NPK alone, you see, or pH. We have to have a complete 13 plus elements at least to start with, a probe or a graph or a sensor, which can give us immediately what are the requirements. I mean, what are the availability? Then we can get into an agronomist, fine tune it through your IT. I mean, we have experts in that now. We get the answer for it. Otherwise, it's of no use. So any nutrient has to be in the food chain. I now, I've changed my conversation saying not I got, 50 tons of rice, 50 tons of something else. Now I said 20 tons of capsicum. Instead of that, I say 20 tons worth of nutrient has been mined from my soil to the market. That means I have to replenish back. Where is the question of replenishing? How do you do that? Unless you test your soil comprehensive and then minus what you have mined, then substitute that for the next crop which is needed. Then the optimum performance is done.
Great. Next is, sir, your opinion on organic farming movement in Tamil Nadu and India.
Yeah, everywhere it is there. It's not only in Tamil Nadu, across is there. See, one thing, plant, there are two things that which we get confused. One is plant food and the other is plant medicine. Plant food, like, phosphorus, potash, zinc, boron, all these are plant food. It's also part of our food. You see, we take multivitamin. What is the multivitamin contents? These are the minerals and other vitamins are there part of the capsule, and we take it as a food supplement. The same thing given it to the crop, then it is called poison. Second, pesticides. Pesticides are nothing but antibiotics, antifungal elements, all this called pesticide. Nomenclature differs for plant, for human being. Now, if I get a sick and I go to a doctor, he is going to prescribe me based on my, the problem, antibiotics or whatever that is. Antiviral, now we are with the corona. So the doctor will prescribe me the exact medicine and guide me how I should avoid it. And I have to take his, advice and go follow it up accordingly. The other one, plant cannot accept anything organic. They cannot eat organic. It has to be converted into anionic. So this nomenclature is confusing us between these two elements. Finally, indiscriminate use of food or medicine is poison. So we have to be judiciously applying into it, not indiscriminately using it. Most of us use these tools indiscriminately. Like one good example, in Maharashtra, when I was traveling, a farmer was spraying for a brinjal crop. But that was not actually a disease. It's a secondary infection. Primarily, there was a calcium deficiency in his soil. So blossom and rot. Blossom and rot was the problem, but he was spraying fungicide. Look at that. And then you turn around and blame the fungicide. So we have to create this awareness among the people, and that is the organic and inorganic system.
Okay, next question is, what to do about fruit flies on guava? How to help a lemon tree fruit if it has not fruited in a long time?
It is too difficult to answer that because it requires a lot of data to look into it. What is the weather pattern and what soil in which it is sitting there? So white flies, generally you have a lot of medicine for white fly. But again, I say sanitation plays a very vital role. So you have to see where is this white fly is hiding in your farm. First clean up that. Then there are wonderful medicines to remove the white flies. But the fruit fly, there are a lot of pheromones are available by Pest Control of India. Again, without a sanitation, you are inviting trouble continuously and then trying to eradicate it, which you are not going to do. We are not giving importance for sanitation. See, now look at Corona incident. We have to do three things. Every television is jumping with these three. Wear a mask, then wash, move. Now this is continuous. That means cleanliness, hygiene plays a vital role in keeping away pests and diseases. Same thing we have to do it for the crop also. In lemon, it is a very critical crop. It demands a lot of micronutrients. I'm not sure what is your exact problem that it is not fruiting. Check your, you can even get, if you're an orchard grower, then you can get the tissue analyzed in the laboratory and find out what the nutrient that it has consumed and what your soil is having. What is it that you have applied? That should give you the results.
Okay. So next one is, we feel that agricultural community is still reluctant using technology in irrigation. How to change the mindset? Do you think it will change?
Very simple. We are all economic animals. If you tell him, if you do this from 1 rupee, you get 10 rupee. Who will say no to it? But that has to be demonstrated. That's going to be, my end of my talk. In fact, to say that as you have opened it up, I'll say this. We have to demonstrate the economical benefit of this. So I would call, the pain list, the institution and the rest of the group should have demo farms across India. When I say demo farms, it has to be continuous, not just, start with something and then you go away with it. Continuously work for at least 3 to 4 seasons, show him the way, let him replicate it or, scale it up in that way. That is the way to go forward.
Okay. So next one is how to reduce pest using any mechanical or other techniques, thereby reduction of pesticide or avoiding it.
Yeah, good question. Pesticide, which includes weeds. Weeds is also a pest, right? Now, weeds you can avoid by developing a proper tool in between the crop to go with mechanized weeders. Now, for this, we have to standardize the land preparation system. That means the land has to be prepared in such a way the mechanization can happen smoothly for the first 45 days of its duration. And if you can take care of first 45 days of crop during this mechanized weeders, minimum usage of herbicides, which are only to take care on in between the crop, the surface area of application comes down to 30 to 40%.
Okay. So one of the questions which I like to ask too is what are Madhavan's views on soil-less agriculture, example hydroponics?
I always get into cost per unit, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, can you, the food cost, please check all the, I'm putting this question to across this table. Please check in your own domestic area. We are actually 60 to 65% of our earning goes to food. Can we afford more expensive food?
Yeah.
So our aim should be whatever the technology is, whether it is hydroponic or mist chamber or controlled irrigation, you call anything, cost per unit. One good example I will give you. Cabbage per head costing me, say it was around 6 rupees in 2015 per head per kilo. I brought it down to 3 rupees. So cost per unit once drops down, consumer get, at the same time I get about 30 to 40% of on my return on investment. See, it has to be both. I do not like the subsidies, freebies, throw away all that, because you don't have to do that. You can make profit as well as the consumer can get benefit out of it. Our cost per unit has to be 15 to 20% only and not 60%, which is presently there. How do you bring it down? If hydroponics brings it down, excellent. No problem, we can get in there. So the only idea is, can the hydroponic produce celery which is reachable to a rickshawala? Why it should be denied? Why it should be only for the creamy society, right? Food should be for all. Everybody should get it at affordable cost. And if you are doing it with hydroponics, excellent. But I feel we have enough agronomical condition, endowed on us. We can try that. Maybe climate change in down the line about a decade ago, we can go and work on it. The cost per unit is too high in those infrastructure area. Obviously, that's going to reflect on your cost of produce.
Okay.
Otherwise, the technology is wonderful. That's no doubt. My concern is only make food cheaper and affordable. Nutritious food should be cheaper and affordable, which is not around now presently. We may say, that godowns are full and people are. The thing is, when it is 100 rupees, I want to cut it down to 100 grams of my buying. You see, if it is 50 rupees, I'll go for 250 grams of my produce. So by increasing the cost per unit, I'm reducing my consumption. That doesn't mean there is an over, production there. I've reduced it. I don't take vegetables because it is too expensive. So I replace it with rice. You see, then I'm taking an imbalanced diet on that because of the cost. If the dal is expensive, if it's a vegetarian, then the dal is a source of protein. That's expensive. Now, if you're going to produce something which is in a very expensive way, that is cost per unit is high, then how will you sell it at a 30% of return on your investment so that the consumer can buy it at a cheaper rate?
So, yeah. Next question we have is how to overcome the challenges of Congress grass in field,
Yeah.
especially in North India.
Excellent. See, any weeds, you have to control them before they set seeds. So the weed seed bank of any soil, especially in India, it is flooded. Every soil has 5 seeds. So 1:5 is the present ratio. For every one particle of soil, there are 5 seeds. That means who has created this? We have increased the weed seed bank. You know what we try to do? We weed it when they are flowering or they're fruiting. So already the seed is set. Each plant has thousands of seeds drop down. Sanitation plays a very vital role. So before they start producing seeds, arrest them. Continuously, you have to go through that chain. And ultimately, you can get away with it. I had the same Congress problem around in 80s. Now I have nil, not even one. Sanitation. See, when you're using a mechanical tools, you're hiring a tractor from, local. And say, for example, he is plowing around that area and the same tractor tool is brought into your field without sanitizing it. People will laugh at it. Hey, what is this? We have done it for 100 years. Yes, the result is here. So he brings that seed from the neighbor to you, right? So the tool has to be washed. I do that. And I have seen the changes. And nil, I brought it to nil, where it was flooded. Now nil. It took almost 4 years, consistent effort to bring it down to zero. Now I'll be very careful. And one more thing is manure. Manure is another source of weed seed bank. Most of our cows and goats are fed only with the bund grass, and most of them they graze around and swallow the seeds, then ingest it, throws out in their garbage also the seeds, and you bring that seed into your own field, and then trying to solve your problem.
Okay, next we have how do we deal with the problem of farmer illiteracy? Operating agriculture technologies will demand a lot of technical know-how from farmers.
Yes,
So,
sir. Yes,
illiteracy.
sir. Beautiful. I keep, banging at this, saying educated should get in there. Educated youth, if there is a money, I think that is the reason I said that slide is very important on the economical slide, which I mentioned it. What do you want ultimately? Because farming is non-viable, not making money, obviously anybody is not going to get in there. And the youth wants to earn, enjoy around, which is perfectly fine. Why don't they take up farming as a profession? Start leasing land, you see. Lease the land. Don't buy the land because the land is very expensive. Lease. I had a very good model for that. If somebody is interested, can get in there. And we are trying to develop a curriculum with the escorts at TTDC to train people on the entrepreneurship. If somebody is interested, they can get in touch with them.
Sure. Okay. Also, the problem of cost, farming equipment, machinery, fertilizers, etc. would require farmers to possess large funds. But most Indian farmers are small-scale farmers and cannot gain access to these facilities. So, yeah.
I have a solution to that also. Why don't these entrepreneurs, engineers, instead of farming, buy all the tools and outsource it to the farmers and create an enterprise out of that? You go and tailor make it, right? So the farmer will call you, XYZ. Hey, I have 5 acres to be plowed and land leveled and fertilizer placed, done. Why don't you do it? Why don't we create an industry in that area? So farmer doesn't have to buy that. The small marginal farmers can hire from these technocrats. And who will come and do their jobs? Whether it is a land preparation, pest management. See, now even the drones are there in pest management. Why don't they come there and demonstrate it? That's the reason I said we should have a demo farm with all this. Farmers should come and see it and explain them the model. They can outsource it and these youth can get in there as a job opportunity. And bank can loan them, for all the gadgets, bank can loan and they can buy all the equipments and keep it and outsource it to 100 acres or 150 acres around the village. And they make money and also serve the farming community, both.
Yeah. Okay. Sir, your comment on low input demanding traditional paddy varieties versus high input demanding hybrids and its yield economy.
No, sir, anything, as I keep repeating, cost per unit. What you put, you get out. You put low input, you get low output. As simple as that. So when you have a low output, cost per unit is very high. So I have to sell paddy at 150 rupees. How many can afford it? A wheat, anything for that matter. As long as, I request to all the audience, cost per unit, if it is low, with environmentally sustainable, right? I think we should take that as an appropriate answer to it.
Yeah.
You can do anything. You can do low input and say, for example, you get 500 kilos of paddy per acre, right? After sitting there for almost 150 days, 140 days, right? This 500, how much you're going to sell it per grain? You're going to put a cost per grain. Otherwise, for you, it is unsustainable. As an entrepreneur or as an industrial, you cannot sustain there. And there is a competition across the world, right? Now somebody can import food which are much cheaper than that. So why would they come here? Only maybe 5 to 6% of it. See, I completely agree. People are scared of residual pesticide, residual toxicity, etc. All this level. But their science has to come in. It's like antibiotic taken by us across the counters. Though doctors and medical professionals are crying for it, saying don't take across the medical counters. Go to a doctor, let the doctor prescribe for you. The same thing, we are not applying it to the crop here. You see, he takes up a plant and go to a local, the mandi wala, and then he say, oh, okay, you spray this. Then he comes and spray this. You see, that comes into a food chain which is dangerous. I agree on that. But how do we correct it? Educated should get in there. That's why I said come pest management. You can employ an agronomist and plant specialist into your mechanical tools. And he will recommend for that. And you are going to go and spray. And once you have a credibility, why would farmer run away from it? He said he will demand from you. The service will be demanded from you because his problem is solved. But now presently, he's not sure. Somebody says spray this white, somebody says spray red, somebody say black. By the time the crop is over, so he commits suicide at the end of the day, which should be avoided. For that, educated youth should get in there with the tools and create a demo farm and see and show him that this is possible. Always think in terms of economic. Cost per unit has to be low. Otherwise, farmer is not going to accept, like any industry. Any industry. If a raw material for a company, say take a steel company, if the raw material is too high, you think he's going to take that? No way. He's going to find an alternative way how to bring the cost per unit low. If a Maruti sells at 1 rupee a car, Tata is going to say 50 paise a car. How is that? You see, I'm just putting the economic, not 1 rupee 50 paise, but then the whole idea is that's how it should be. And that is only possible if a young, technical talents get there. And we have enough. We have so many young talents, but then they are scared. You see, they are not sure whether to jump in there or not. I think entrepreneur should not have that fear.
Yes. So somebody asked, what is your opinion on GMO crops?
India is not ready for GMO crops because GMO can contribute to the productivity level very, very, very low, very minuscule. Only the pest attack or the problem with the pesticide loss could have been matched for. We are not ready yet because with the present available local varieties, our productivities are very, very low. It's extremely low. Why don't we try to do that? It is like this, we are now in the LKG, kindergarten level. And why not we graduate that slowly and then come back to it little later?
So we have another question is, we are a startup in IoT based automation device for agriculture. We have recently developed very low cost irrigation controller, especially for small farmers.
Yeah.
How to reach farmer community across India directly to provide them the solution at very, very low cost that we developed.
Yes.
Also, we will be very happy to connect with you to help farmers.
Excellent. Why not we have a demo farm? Take 10 acres, 15 acres, demonstrate all these techniques, bring hordes of farmers first nearby villages, close by villages, or, the participants who are now joining in this should take up farming as a profession, so that these tools which you have wonderfully developed should be demonstrated. You see, they are just sitting as an ideal in the showpiece. Bring it to the farm level, and we may have to correct it or fine tune it. That's okay, fine. We have such good brains, and we can do that in no time. Our people are excellent. We don't have to go anywhere else. The only thing is we are little hesitant. That's all. If we can break that barrier, the sky is the limit.
Next is, will using bullock instead of tractors for plugging make a difference?
Some of the operation we can do, but not all the operation, because agriculture is an operation where we are time bound, and now climate, that's another issue which we are facing, drudgery. So how do you avoid with all this? People have done it. It's a wonder. I have developed my tools using bullocks only. But then that cost, the cost per unit is very high. All our attempt, our technological intervention has to be how to bring down, how to make food cheaper. Which way? If the bullock is going to make you cheaper, wonderful, why not? But as far as I have looked at it, I used a bullock. Now it's only a showpiece. The cost is very high. The cost per unit of my produce, if I use a bullock, is too high. I have to use tools, mechanical tools. Otherwise, I cannot compete in the market. And the quality, timely application. Say, bullock takes a little longer compared to your mechanical tools. If with a tractor, if I can apply it, 20 acres, I've done it in one day. Bullock takes almost 1 week. Every day counts as far as the farming is concerned, because we are working with the climate and number of days, very short. Our period is very short for land preparation or for cultivation or for weeding. We cannot afford even 1 day late. That has its own consequences to be. So ultimately, before we decide which is to go, which not to go, or why not to go, I think we all have to think how to bring down the cost per unit. That has to be now the next way. In my previous slides, the first, third, or fourth slide, I said management. Management comes in with all this. How to bring down your cost per unit and increase the manpower efficiency. How do you increase the manpower efficiency? Or scale him up from a low level to a next skilled level. How do you do it? Now a bullock was driven. Now scale him up, train him with a tractor driver and using all these tools. That means the next level he is coming up. We have to make slowly from lowly occupation to industrial occupation.
Okay. So many questions we are receiving.
No, what we can do is, let's not waste others' time. You post it and we will answer them slowly.
Sure.
There is no issue at all. I know that's the reason I ran through my presentation and waited for the question hours. I know very well.
Yeah.
That's the reason I rushed that and waited for this. And I'm not surprised.
Okay. So Rahul, are you there?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, Aditya. Hi.
You
Unfortunately,
are
I've just started traveling, so I'm on my way. Laptop is with me, so no worries. I was listening to Madhavan sir in any case. So, are we done with the talk, or are we going to take some more questions as well?
See, I have no issue for another 10 minutes, maybe maximum. Then
Yes.
The rest, rest of the questions, I am respecting those questions. I'm not saying no to it. I will answer it at my own pace.
Okay.
And
Sure.
definitely
So, sir, what we'll do is probably we'll compile all these questions, send it to you, and then we have already collected email IDs and phone numbers from each of the participants. So we will, send out the emails to each of them with answers from you.
Okay, no, but see, I have a suggestion. Now this group,
Sure.
group, like the Ragul team, I call it Ragul team. Okay. Now this Ragul team should maybe join with the ETDC at Bangalore. Let me talk to the escorts team, what their opinion, I don't know. But I think we should be doing that, joining it in creating a demo farm with all these tools and technologies. What do you say? Think about it and come back to me on this. Or you can even, put it on the platform to Mr. Sandeep, who is part of your, initiated this whole process.
Sure, sir. We'll do that.
Thank you very much for the great opportunity. And I'm sorry if I have not answered any question, but definitely it will be answered. I don't underestimate any questions. I will definitely do that at my pace. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir.
Sure, sir. And thank you so much, sir, for agreeing to do this talk on a very short notice. So currently we are already running the applications for big scheme under which biotechnology, agri-tech and health tech and medtech applications are accepted. So most of these participants would also, this talk would also help a lot of participants to understand the problem statement that they are working much better probably, and this should help. And obviously going forward, we are anyways coming up with many other such initiatives. So we'll keep inviting you for such talks and other sessions.
More than a talk, let's do it. My request.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. This talk is just half part of the plan.
Ragul, please, Ragul, let's do something, then talk about it later. Not talk first and then do later. Let's do
Absolutely, sir.
Not something cracking.
Right.
I have not spoken to the team escorts, but I'm sure they will agree with this. Let's start something in collaborating, possibly, looking at various, administrative areas and see whether how we can collaborate and get out on a practical ground.
Absolutely, sir. So next part of this session is obviously we'll send out an email to all the participants of all the talks and including this one, and we'll be asking them to present solutions that they can think of, concept notes, and we will be selecting 2 concept notes, one in healthcare and one in agriculture, and they will be supported up to 2 lakh rupees to start developing the POC. So that is why I said half is the talk and remaining half is the.
Yeah, you can also write in that way. ETDC is also training. We are also planning to have a entrepreneurial training program for entrepreneurs who are interested. You see, then we can get into that collaboration and he can start demonstrating anywhere, whether it is Uttar Pradesh or I don't mind where state, what state.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely, we'll do that.
Thank you, and I sign off.
With that, Aditya, you can. Yeah, Aditya, you can thank the participants and then we can close the session.
Thank you very much for all the participants who are there.
Thank you so much.
Your questions and your team, all the very best of it. Hopefully we come out with something. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, we'll end the session here. Thank you everyone for joining, and we can end it. Yeah, thank you.